1. 0.0035%. That's how much a human eye can see from the entire electromagnetic spectrum. What is left? Human brain fills that up from the information it gets, including smell, taste, or sound. Speaking of sound, or hearing is also on the lower end. Only from 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, 16,000 Hz if you're an adult. Everything below or above that we basically cannot hear. The world is full of colors, sounds, and smells we cannot comprehend as a human species. What lies beyond our senses, invisible forms, energy, spirits, paranormal? Thinking about paranormal, it strikes me weirdly that if the spectrum of our senses are so low, then can we even see if there is something? What is the usual evidence people bring up when talking about the paranormal? EVP sounds, pictures, stories, personal experiences? Think about this for a moment. If beyond our sense lies something we cannot understand or even have a clear idea about, how can we know about it? This fraction of reality we usually bring up when we try and say that I experienced something paranormal, I saw something paranormal, I heard something I cannot explain. It all has to operate in the spectrum we are capable of understanding and experiencing. Nothing can go beyond. Why am I so keen to find something in the field that basically is less than 1% of the reality I experience? How do I go deeper or break boundaries? Is it even possible? I'm not saying or suggesting there is nothing beyond that, because, quite the opposite, I believe everything is beyond this realm, which we perceive so little of. Sadly, the fact is that I live in a reality that we can experience next to nothing. There is one place, though, where I can break reality, and that is my dreams. People all around the world have experienced stuff in their dreams. This is not always just dreams that tell you the future, not dead relatives, no ghosts or time travelers, but ideas, inspirations, answers and revelations. Dreams may be one of the most underrated places where we are doing our hunt for the paranormal. Maybe it is because we have been so used to the idea that dreams do not equal reality. We cannot bring anything from dreams to this world, aside from the vague memories we got. What if the technology advances so that we can now document our dreams? Would you take it? Would I take it? There are reasons why nightmares stay inside our head, and not often carried into the real world. Ones that do usually haunt me for months, though by some futuristic dream-capturing machine, I could bottle up that nightmare and look at it. At the same time, it terrifies me, and at the same time, the idea is enchanting. What can I find from my dreams if I remember them to the finest detail? Another way I can experience something beyond my natural senses are to scramble up my brain via drugs. Psychedelic experiences are one of the most common subjects. Whenever I talk about anything paranormal or experiences beyond our natural spectrum, there's a catch though, because the brain is tricky. It shows something there is not. I was a kid, and the last time I had a wicked fever so bad that I saw things. A bunch of toys cleaning up my room. Not much of an astounding paranormal experience thinking back. What is real in reality? What is paranormal in normal? I remember my friend, who used to use all kinds of drugs when he was a young adult, and I always remember him telling me about his most traumatic experience. I won't go into details, but I can tell about the aftermath. I remember him saying that he locked himself in his room at his school campus, and he wouldn't come out, because he was not sure what was real and what was not. He said that the most horrifying thought about tripping balls was that the line between reality and not reality was suddenly gone. How could he, from the sounds, sights, smells, disassociate, tell apart what was not real, because it all felt like living, breathing reality to him? He waited for a week for his brains to calm down, and then he could somewhat tell what is real and what is not. So maybe there is a part of my thought today. Everything I can get out in English, because it is not my native language, so my ways of telling or explaining my experiences, thoughts, or ideas are sadly limited, like our senses. Happy Halloween month, everyone. Stay safe, stay interested, stay in touch of the reality. no matter how small it is for us. 2. Let me start this off by saying I've never truly believed in ghosts. I never wanted to, nor drew any interest in believing in the paranormal, until me and my wife moved into our new home at the start of the year. We live in a nice area, the house isn't too old, and we are in Michigan. When we first moved in, there was absolutely no reason for us to believe it was haunted. About 2 months went by, and we started to experience things that could be written off as natural, such as lights turning on, electronics turning on and off, or curtains moving. We blamed it all on faulty electrical wiring or breezes, and didn't think too much of it, other than making a few jokes about it being haunted. Eventually, things escalated, and boy did they escalate quickly. The first big encounter we experienced was our bedroom door slamming shut while we were watching a movie downstairs. And it was loud enough to rattle the paintings on the living room walls, so, of course, we ran up to check what happened. When we opened the door, the bedding was off our bed when it was originally tidy, and the curtain pole had fell off the window. We didn't think much of this, as we believe it fell off due to the door being slammed, since our paintings rattled downstairs, but worth a mention. We got spooked by this, and this would happen regularly. It was never a different room, always the main bedroom, door being slammed during the day and at night, things being in places we didn't leave them, pillows on the floor, etc. Before I mention this next part, I just want to ensure you know my wife has never experienced sleep paralysis in her entire life, until one night in April, where she woke up and saw a tall figure that resembled a human but wasn't. The figure didn't move. She described it as standing still, watching in the corner of the room. This freaked her out enough that she woke me up, and we both had to sit and watch a movie till she could feel comfortable enough to sleep. Things didn't stop there. They got more aggressive. We haven't been physically harmed yet, but things would be thrown, paintings dropped off of walls, pillows thrown across the room again, bottles of deodorant being slammed off of walls. It is to the point where I am mentally drained of coming home from work and knowing there is a huge mess to clean up. What can we do? What is this thing that is doing all of this, and why? Our house isn't that old. I'd say 60s or 70s. We live in a nice area. Why would it be haunted? I was hoping I could get closure here, and I understand most people won't believe anything I've said, but we are so mentally drained, and we can't afford to move. Please help us. I fear things are only going to get worse and physical. Is this a warning? Is it just getting started? Anything, any help? 3. I was 7 when I first went to sleepaway camp. Naturally, the camp had a lot of ghost stories. I've always been a believer in the supernatural and saw strange things when I was younger. The story I'm about to tell happened when I was 15, one warm summer night at camp. The camp used to be an all-boys boarding school, but is now a co-ed marine-based camp sitting in a valley. As I mentioned before, when I was 7 I heard stories of ghosts who haunted the camp. These stories always scared me, but it didn't stop me from coming back to the camp 5 times. I went when I was 7 to 10, and then 15 to 16. One particular story has always been very popular, which is the story of the little red-headed girl. It goes as follows. The headmaster of the boarding school would fly over the school every year on his son's birthday and drop candy for the students from his airplane. One year he took his young daughter and someone else up in the plane. I don't remember who exactly. Tragically, the plane flew too low and clipped a eucalyptus tree and exploded in a fiery crash up in the canyon. Apparently, both bodies of the adults were found burned, and evidence showed that they died upon impact of the plane hitting the ground, but the body of the little girl was never found. To this day, stories of people seeing and even talking to the little red-headed girl are passed on between campers. Apparently, she is known to walk the perimeter road of the camp, asking for her mommy and wanting to play. You know, usual Ghost Kid stuff. The girls' quad is a rectangular building surrounding a dirt patch in the middle. Once grassy, but the drought killed most of it. This particular year, I was in a cabin section known as Owl. Owl was one whole side of the rectangle and had a cement patio out back with clotheslines for campers to hang their wetsuits and towels. Owl also shared a large communal bathroom with a couple of stalls and sinks. My cabin consisted of 10 girls in total, and we all slept in bunk beds in one room. I chose a bottom bunk because I knew from previous years that the room would get very hot, and the lower you were to the ground, the cooler you would be while sleeping. Unfortunately, I wasn't the first in the room, so I ended up with the only bed in the room that did not back up to a wall on more than one side. Basically, the bed was in the middle of the room and was directly next to the door leading to the back patio. I've always felt more comfortable sleeping next to a wall I can back up against. But I wasn't too upset because I felt safe in this room with so many other people. One night I woke up because I had to pee. I got up and stumbled my way out of the cabin and out onto the front patio on the quad side and walked to the bathroom. There was a small clock hung on the wooden pillar in the quad, and I remember it displaying that it was somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning. I stepped into the cold, tiled bathroom and turned on the bright white fluorescent lights, which were accompanied by a loud whirring fan sound. I sat down in the toilet and was snapped out of my groggy state by the cold toilet seat. I did my business and began walking back to my room. At this point I was just excited to crawl back into my sleeping bag, and was not thinking about anything scary possibly happening. As I opened the door to my cabin, my eyes were adjusting to the darkness of the room, and I could only see the windows. The curtains were always open so that the breeze could blow through, and so the only light in the room at night was from the moonlight. What I saw made me freeze out of pure fear. In the window I saw a short figure with small hands with fingers that ended in a spike, pressing its hands and face up to the window. I couldn't move for what felt like a minute, but in reality, I quickly got into my bed as my heart was racing and tears began to well up in my eyes. I told myself it must be a prank. Maybe the counselors or some boys had cut a piece of paper and stuck it to the window. After 5 minutes of sitting in bed wondering what I should do, I saw one of my cabin mates, Nikki, turn over in her top bunk bed. Quietly I whispered, "Nikki, are you awake?" "Yeah," she responded. "There's someone in the window," I whispered. Nikki was confused and asked me what I was talking about. I told her to look at the window next to Ellen's bed. She said there was nothing there. At this point I started to cry out of the realization that this, most likely, wasn't a prank, and began to spiral into a full-blown panic attack. Other girls in the cabin started to wake up due to the commotion and asked what happened. What happened after that wasn't super important, but I ended up sleeping in my friend Patricia's bed with her for the rest of the night. In the morning I explained to the rest of the girls what happened, with some believing me and some not. They didn't think I was lying, they just didn't believe the story had happened as I described it. I told my counselor and the other counselors, and it wasn't until I was reminded of the story. I also went outside to look for any evidence of something being there. Or maybe some dust being wiped away on the dirty screen, but nothing. I also determined that the height of the person standing in the window would have been about waist height to chest level on me. I didn't experience anything the rest of my camp experience, but for the rest of the time I tried to avoid getting up at night, and when I entered the room after sunset, I would purposely not look at the window out of fear that whatever or whoever I saw would come back. 4. I was a minor when all of this happened. Take it with a grain of salt if you'd like to. At the time, I lived with my father, stepmother, and siblings in a triplex apartment. Our family dynamic was quite abusive and unsettling. To top it off, our apartment seemed to harbor eerie occurrences, including the inexplicable sound of dining chairs dragging at night, and footsteps on the staircase when everyone was asleep. 3 incidents particularly shook me. Firstly, I frequently experienced sleep paralysis and lucid dreams. One of the dreams took place within the old colonial building we resided in. Strangely, I felt completely normal in this dream, just casually walking around, despite the odd ambience of the setting. It was weird because the lift was working. It never worked when we lived there. The wall paint looked newer in comparison, and the doors to each apartment looked different, almost like it went years back. The most terrifying incident happened when my father and stepmother went on a trip, leaving us alone with my older cousin. One night while I was alone in my room with the lights off, the TV was on with very loud music, I saw a woman. She was stunningly beautiful but otherworldly, with curly hair, black eyes, dilated pupils, and olive skin. She just kept staring at me, and I froze. Her gaze sent chills down my spine. I couldn't discern whether it was malicious or empty. I screamed and fled my room, seeking refuge with my cousin, who immediately rang my uncle and aunt, who stayed with us that night. Sometimes our stereo would turn on by itself, blaring at maximum volume. Eventually, we moved to a larger place, but years later, when we returned to this old apartment, strange events persisted. This time, I didn't see any apparitions, but I heard my guitar strings being played and some whistling, all originating from my room where I first saw her. I was not alone, so I knew I wasn't imagining these occurrences. To this day, I regret not discovering the identity of that mysterious woman, or whatever she was. As an adult, my curiosity about that encounter has only grown. She was one of the few ghosts I ever saw. 5. This happened around 12 years ago, when I was 6 or 7 years old. My family, me, my little sister, and my parents, lived in a 3-story apartment building, and our apartment had a 2nd story, which basically was a loft, which my parents used as their bedroom. The apartment had a basement, where there was mostly storage spaces and an office my father usually worked at. One day I was in our apartment playing games on my PS3. My father and my sister were in the basement office, and my mother was away for work that day. I had paused my game and went to the kitchen to make some sandwiches. While I was in the kitchen, I heard my game being continued. I was playing FIFA at that time, and could hear the ball being kicked, even though I was in a game mode where there was only me and the goalkeeper. I went on to check what was happening, and when I got there, I didn't see anyone. My game was on pause, though. Right after that, I could hear someone messing up papers in my loft. My father had an office table where he sometimes worked also, but usually he would go to the basement office to do his work because it was more practical. I went to the loft to check the noise, but again, there was no one. I went on to check the office table, and all the papers were scrambled up. At this point, I got very scared because I was still at a very young age. The one last thing I heard was that one of my boxes where I kept my toys were being scrambled through. Again, I went to check, and there was still no one to be seen. At this moment, in fear, I ran to the basement office where my father and my sister were, and started telling the story to them. My father was busy with work and couldn't be bothered to come check, since, for him, it sounded like something I made up. My sister said that I was just hearing things, and I got her to come up and check the sounds for herself. For this point, it is important to know that through the front door it was possible to see the kitchen counter where I was making the sandwiches. So, when we got up to the apartment with my sister, we heard 2 knives being ground together. We peeked through the door and could see that there was no one in the kitchen, but the sound was still clearly coming from there. I looked at my sister and could see that she also heard it. We both closed the door shut and in a spooked state went crying down to the office. We ended up not going up until our father was done with the day. After a couple of hours, we went back up to our apartment and showed my father the exact way the events had occurred by going through room by room what had happened. That night, my father tried to explain that there is nothing to be scared of and tried to explain why some of the sounds happened. I never heard any sounds after that. My family moved out around a couple of years after this story. I still tell this story to friends and everyone says I'm just full of BS. Around a year or so ago, I brought up the story to my father again, and we had a talk about it. He said he remembered us being frightened out of our minds, but didn't want himself to show us that he was scared. He tried to find explanations to the sounds to give us a reason why they could have happened to make us feel better. He has a tiny belief to the story, since every time I told the story it always stayed the same. To this day, I still wonder what made all those sounds. I forgot to mention that I do not believe in anything paranormal. I always try to find a solution to see why something would happen. Even though I have experienced something like this, it has not made me believe in paranormality. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 348. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button and share the video with friends and family and your cats. Well, I guess they're also family, aren't they? Also, if you'd like to throw money at me, you can do so through Patreon for as little as $1 or more if you wish a month. You can also buy some Hellfreezer merchandise, both of which are linked in the description, the Hellfreezer Teespring store, and you can make donations during streams and videos just like this one. Well, you don't have to. It helps me pay some bills. Okay, let's see. No other business as far as I'm aware today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, now that we are firmly in the spooky season, we're in October, and as we all know, Halloween lasts all of October. I think that's a law, right, as far as I know? What is your favorite spooky movie to watch this time of year? Or what's your favorite type of spooky movie? I mean, I love slasher movies, but with Jason, I can watch them any time of the year. But this time of year, I especially love ghost stories. I actually finally got around to finishing off the show Supernatural recently. I kind of got stuck partway through season 13 and just didn't really want to continue, but I decided a few weeks ago, nope, I'm going to get it done and finished. And there were some good episodes in there overall, and I'm glad I finished it. But yeah, ghost movies, that's the thing for me. I've been having an urge to watch Poltergeist again. Or maybe the remake of Pet Sematary. I've not seen the remake yet, but I hear it's quite good. But anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite kind of spooky movies are in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.